one of Rees's key contacts and highest payers.
Nobody pays like News of the World do.
Ukrainian-born Maranchak has so far been able to distance himself from the scandal. He's one of the few senior editors of the time not on charges.
He was great. He should have been made editor. I don't think we'd be in this mess if he had been.
Why great?
Oh, smooth operator, knew the job backwards.
Four Corners has uncovered new evidence linking Maranchak more closely to Rees's operation. Company documents show that in 1996, Maranchak established an import-export business operating out of Rees's premises, in partnership with another News of the World reporter, Greg Miskew. The police surveillance reveals frequent contact between Rees and Maranchak.
Yeah, look, I've spoken to him.
At one stage, Rees is telling someone that he's owed £7,000 by Maranchak, and once that's paid, it'll be close to the monthly limit. So there was quite a lot of money coming from the News of the World.
In April 1999, BBC TV presenter Jill Dando was murdered on her doorstep. Rees's invoices show that Maranchak paid him for information on the murdered celebrity. A series of exclusive articles soon appeared with Maranchak's byline. Rees is usually careful about what he puts down in the invoices.
Yeah, Rees. This is tiresome. Fucking tiresome. We're not going to put the numbers in there because what we're doing is illegal. All right?
Illegal and profitable. Rees was earning up to £150,000 a year from the News of the World. His targets were varied: celebrities, footballers, politicians. Tony Blair's press secretary, Alistair Campbell, was one of them.
Insofar as it related to me, it wasn't the News of the World, it wasn't even the Daily Mail, it was the Mirror, which is my old paper.
Ex-News of the World reporter Gary Jones, who'd moved to the Mirror, paid Rees for information on Campbell.
It seems to be that they were, in a sense, replacing journalists. Now, presumably that was for two reasons, possibly to cut costs, but the other reason, you assume, is because it meant the private detectives could do things that journalists can't.
Rees had been dealing with at least 3 different newspapers. The News of the World, foremost, probably, the Sunday Mirror, close second, and the Daily Mirror.
Well, it was exceptionally competitive because, you know, we were the biggest selling paper in the world, apart from Chinese Times. And we wanted to define the week's news. And it was a Sunday paper, so you had to get exclusives that would hold until Sunday. That's difficult.
Paul McMullen worked on the features desk during this period, in competition with his own news desk. They didn't use Rees, they had their own private investigators.
The paper was set up in 2 competing departments, features and news. There was no crossover between PIs between the 2 departments because they wouldn't have wanted us to know what they were doing. You know, that was the whole problem. It was just running out of control.
Just how widespread those practices were across a range of newspapers was revealed in a 2003 investigation into another private detective. Operation Motorman was carried out by the British Information Commissioner on a man called Steve Whittemore.
We knew the media were involved. It was the extent of the trade and the way in which Whittemore ran a full-time business on this. It was around about 30 publications, around about 300 journalists.
Former policeman Dave Clancy is the Information Commissioner's chief investigator. His team led the raid on Whittemore's house.
They entered the premises, executed the search warrant and found a number of documents which clearly indicated that he was heavily involved in the unlawful trade in personal information.
They seized 4 ledgers. The Blue Book was for Rupert Murdoch's News International. It contained 922 requests made by 28 journalists from its tabloid papers.
Steve Whittemore was getting £2 to £4 grand a week. He was earning more than the reporters.
Investigators identified more than 17,000 requests to Steve Whittemore. The Daily Mail was at the top of the list.
He had people who specialised in blagging into credit card companies. He had a couple of people who specialised in blagging into phone companies. So he could get into almost any confidential database he wanted.
Some of the requests to Whittemore were legal. Most were not, including 29 examples of accessing the police national computer.
It's quite clear that from the information we have that lots of journalists were involved in criminal activity.
Steve Whittemore and 3 of his accomplices were convicted of data offences and accessing the National Police database. None of the 4 men went to jail. The Information Commissioner published the lists of offending newspapers, but no journalists or proprietors were charged with anything.
There would have been 15 private investigators working regularly for Fleet Street newspapers, and each of those private investigators was routinely breaking the law. That's why they were being hired. They are blagging into confidential databases. They are hacking voicemail. As time goes by, they get into hacking emails, and occasionally on the fringes, they are organising burglaries.
The South London private detective Jonathan Rees was possibly the most vicious of a bad bunch. Weeks into the police covert surveillance of Rees, they heard him planning a hideous crime.
The police heard discussion about a conspiracy to plant cocaine on a woman who was involved in a custody battle with her husband.
Rees was planning to use his corrupt police contacts to plant a large quantity of cocaine on a young woman, Kim James, and have her arrested.
It was absolutely vile. Not only was it a suggestion seriously made, it was the suggestion carried out. The drugs were planted. The plan was made for her to be shopped to the social services as well as shopped to the police. That young woman would have certainly served a number of years in prison and would have lost her child.
Instead, Rees was caught in a police sting and sentenced to 7 years in prison. Astonishingly, on his release, he would be immediately rehired by the News of the World.
It's absolutely extraordinary that a company, after all, let's say a $50 billion global business, would hire someone who's just served a jail sentence for 7 years for planting drugs on a defenceless woman to try and frame her, and then they hire him to do investigation work. It's just beggars belief.
He wasn't...
Questioned in Parliament last month, the former CEO of News International, Rebecca Brooks, claimed to know nothing about Rees.
Do you believe he conducted illegal activities on behalf of News of the World?
I don't know what he did for the News of the World, I'm sorry. I don't know what he did.
Do you not think people will just find it incredible that as chief executive of the company you don't know?
Well, it may be incredible, but again, it is also the truth.
But even during his time in jail, Rees's links with News International continued. In 2002, the police reopened the investigation into the murder of Rees's business partner, Daniel Morgan.
I'm here tonight to reinvestigate it with the advantage of 15 years of knowledge, and hopefully through this appeal get the nugget of information which will solve this case.
Dave Cook isn't permitted to talk about what happened next, but his wife, former Crime Watch host and detective Jackie Hames, agreed to talk to us.
He was given information which he later relayed to me that as a result of him taking on that case and being the public face of it, that there were certain people who were going to target him, potentially myself and the family, with a view to discrediting us. and in fact derailing that investigation.
They were targeted with the help of senior News International reporter and associate of Rees, Alex Marinchak.
I just saw a van at the end of my driveway parked up, and what was, I suspect, a camera lens looking back, coming out, taking photographs of the front of the house. However hardened you are as a police officer, when you become part of the case and your children are involved, it's hard to actually explain how frightening that is.
Her husband, Detective Cook, also saw the white van.
David was conscious upon driving the children to school that he was being followed, that there was a van pulling up behind him.
Cook was able to give the pursuing van the slip and call up his colleagues on the highway patrol.
He went onto the motorway and arranged via his phone for the vehicle to be stopped, and it was stopped. And the uniform officers spoke to the occupants and established that they were in fact News of the World reporters, employees, and the van was actually leased to the News of the World.
They established that the van was leased to Alex Marinchak. The editor of the News of the World at that time was Rebecca Brooks. She was called to a meeting at Scotland Yard with Detective Dave Cook and other senior police and confronted with the information. Cook explained the surveillance in detail, organised by News of the World reporter Alex Marinchak. By all accounts, Rebecca Brooks offered no explanation. All she had to say was that Marinchak was a great reporter doing great work for the paper.
Nothing happened. Marinchak carried on being employed by the News of the World. No steps seemed to have been taken.
My understanding was that it was people involved in Southern investigations. To hear that somehow News of the World were caught up in this was completely out of the blue for me. I just didn't get it initially.
To this day, no full explanation has been given by News International about its involvement in the surveillance. As the couple would later discover, the intrusion into their lives went much further. Detective Cook and his wife were also targeted by infamous News of the World phone hacker and private eye, Glenn Mulcair.
A couple of months ago, I was approached by officers from Operation Wheating who said that my mobile phone had been found, phone number had been found in the diaries of Glenn Mulcair. So I went along and was shown 2 or 3 pieces of paper, which, yes, included my mobile phone number, also included my home address, home telephone number, but it also had a lot of information which could only have come from my personnel file from the Metropolitan Police. So clearly a lot of work had been done on us, as well as the surveillance, which is a huge amount of effort to go to by a national newspaper. For what reason?
Detective Cook and Jackie Hames knew nothing about Mulcair's involvement until this year, because back in 2006, when Mulcair was arrested, the police chose not to investigate.
You would have thought that whoever was investigating at Scotland Yard would have gone downstairs to David Cook's office and said, "We've just found your name and number in our investigation." No one told him.
It wasn't until Glenn Mulcair was caught hacking into the phones of the royal family, the News of the World reporter Clive Goodman, that phone hacking came to light.
All the best, Clive.
In 2006, 11,000 pages of Mulcair's notes were seized, showing thousands of targets, but police decided to pursue only a handful of cases. From the moment the scandal broke, News International insisted hacking was the work of one rogue reporter, beyond the control even of his editor, Andy Coulson.
I'm absolutely sure that Clive's case was very unfortunate rogue case. I never condone the use of phone